is just to sort of discuss two aspects of our youth-led accountability model. Firstly, how we use it as an advocacy tool and how we train and empower young people to use it to hold leaders to account over the SDGs, and also how we use accountability within an organizational context and sort of looking at the creation of our new global strategy. And yeah, just to say sort of, okay, I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards on any of this as well. First aspect of my presentation is Youth Power, a global campaign to empower young people across the world to hold leaders to account over the promises of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the global goals as they're also known. Just turning the promises that were adopted by 192 UN leaders in September 2015, turning those promises into reality by September 2030. So, firstly, to understand what we do, we have to sort of look at the problem. As we enter the area of what we call at Restless Development peak youth, whereby it's the largest ever generation of young people that the world has ever seen, and that we're ever going to see. And the fact that 9 out of 10 people live in developing countries as well means that there's a huge historic opportunity here. And this generation right now of young men and women across the world stand the best chance of making the global goals happen. And also we're the generation most affected if they fail. And the problems are that in many cases young people aren't allowed access to key decision-making spaces across the global, local and national levels of decision-making. And there's a sort of a significant lack of transparency in many decision-making processes as well. Secondly, as a result of this, in many contexts, there's a serious lack of trust between young people and the government institutions that serve them, and many political parties as well. And because of this lack of access and transparency, we're seeing a disconnect between young people and their governments in many cases. Third result is that many young people, are now being left behind. And one of the founding principles of the Sustainable Development Goals is this concept of leaving no one behind, ensuring that the goals reach everyone. And often young people are being left behind because of their lack of experience or the lack of capacity to engage in, or they're often in a disadvantaged group within societies. And there's a serious long-term risk here that the young people who we are sort of most affected by the goals in the future, and issues such as climate change, they're going to be left behind by policies if we don't have a voice that is accessible and heard by governments in a meaningful way. And in many cases, governments, UN entities, civil society organizations still see young people only as beneficiaries rather than equal partners and critical agents of change that we at Restless Development and that other people, young people rightly should be. So what's our response? Our campaign has 5 pillars to it. I'll come on to data-driven youth-led accountability a bit later, but other pillars include high-level advocacy, so sort of drawing on the evidence generated from the ground. We support young people to make the case for youth-led accountability during sort of big, important global moments such as the High-Level Political Forum. Very recently we had a young youth accountability advocate speak in the Global Festival of Ideas in Bonn as well. And we often find this is the most powerful message if it's delivered by the young people who we serve. Third aspect is national and local campaigns. So we support youth-led and youth-focused organizations across the world to help design and lead their own youth power campaigns adapted to the local and national context. We've supported around 200 organizations to do so in the past 18 months. Fourth pillar is global mobilization. So around key moments throughout the year, and very recently we had a big moment for International Women's Day. Young people and youth power partners and youth champions came together to take collective action to demonstrate the role of young people in delivering the global goals. Really see this harnesses a key sense of togetherness and empowerment within a bigger movement. The fifth aspect on this is future-proofing through evidence, so collecting robust body of evidence from effective and lasting monitoring and accountability processes that these young people develop and implement. And we see this makes development more effective, and it builds trust between young people, governments and institutions. But touch on to the first aspect, which is data-driven youth-led accountability, and in particular these young people, our accountability advocates. So right now, across Africa, Asia, and here in the UK, over 100 young accountability advocates have been trained by Restless Development to build their skills in data collection and analysis to develop national networks and frameworks that directly hold decision makers to account for the commitments they've made to achieve the global goals. And specifically, the key part of this is that Restless Development initially will sort of train, and a central manner will to train these young people and cover topics such as data collection, the interpretation and monitoring of technical accountability language and data frameworks as well, what national priorities and policies are already in place within their context, and we'll connect these young accountability leads with national mentors and Restless Development staff so they will be continually supported throughout their project. The second phase is that we sort of consolidate the accountability advocates and their ability to create networks. So we'll map their accountability ecosystem, which includes political decision-making structures, other civil society organizations, and a broader picture about who is working, who's important, who are the big players in these areas, and how these young accountability advocates can connect with them. Thirdly, these young people will identify and generate their own data for accountability. So they'll sort of look within the SDG context and at the national level and find out where there are gaps in current sources of data and what are the biggest issues that need addressing. And they'll work with their networks to establish their own national level indicators, so using the data that's already there and creating their own citizen-led data sources which can then supplement official primary and secondary data sources from bodies such as the government. A full phase of the project is that we disseminate learning to strengthen the capacity of other government bodies and youth-led organizations to then implement the youth-led accountability model themselves, and we do this through advocacy, through support and creating a body of evidence as well. And the fifth and final phase, as I touched on briefly before, is that we'll undertake evidence-based advocacy. So we support these young accountability advocates to lead their own national level advocacy strategies, demanding greater participation for young people in the monitoring of the SDGs at the national level, and to work with decision makers in applying their new policy change, asks, requirements within the sort of monitoring and accountability frameworks that already exist at the national level. And we have examples here. The picture in the middle is from a young man from in Ghana who, with his team there, collected data in rural areas of the country, specifically looking at maternal mortality, and they gathered in focus groups of young mothers and young nurses, and with the support of Restless Development, he took that message from rural Ghana right to a high-level political forum in New York last July. So yeah, what's the impact of this? On the ground in Uganda, Gulu and the PAC are two small communities, and because of the work that these young accountability advocates have done, and where we've partnered with UNICEF's EU report as well, we've sort of the results have been really great. I mean, Gulu, because directly of our work, there's been a new ordinance on restricting the times in which citizens can access alcohol when it can be purchased, due to large levels of domestic violence in the area, which has been traced back to alcohol. And in the community in the PAC as well, there was our advocacy program, sort of working with the district community development officer, used findings on early marriage we co-developed a program which addressed the concerns, and the data generated by our youth accountability advocates has been adopted by the government to improve their own programming, specifically looking at the issue of child marriage. And so 4 of our young accountability advocates as well have now been elected into local government positions, so we're having an effect on policies in the area, but also empowering these young people to become leaders so that they can then enact change themselves in a much broader way. And other examples of how young people have, these young accountability advocates have taken their message and shared their experiences in the ground of being at the Open Government Partnership, the past couple of summits, and also the regional meeting in South Africa in 2016, the Global World Bank Youth Forum in Washington 2016, as I mentioned, the HLPF in New York last year, European Development Days last year, and also we had a lady, a young accountability advocate from Kenya who spoke in Germany last year at the UN at a conference in Bonn hosted by the UN SDG Action Campaign, where she shared her experiences about how her and her team reflected data in rural Kenya to tackle FGM, working with young girls there. So the second part of my webinar I'll touch on time is the big conversation. It's what Restless Development did to ensure accountability and transparency in the creation of our new global strategy. And it starts back in 2014, and the idea was created to have a global conversation on how young people can take a leading role in tackling the most important issues in the world. And we the big conversation as a result we gathered 5,000 submissions from across 64 countries, specifically looking at three questions. How must the world change? So if young people are to become the world's torchbearers, a quote from Ban Ki-moon, the previous UN Secretary General, towards a poverty-free, more equitable and sustainable world. Three questions. How must the world change to make this happen? What role will you play? So we'll ask the interviewees or the respondents directly to make this happen. What would you most likely to see by 2030? And the innovative and bold youth-led part of this was that the data was collected by Restless Development staff and volunteers from online platforms to rural villages and the countries working, but a creation of a youth strategy team consisting of staff members and volunteers then analysed this data. And I was fortunate enough to be part of this team, whereby we sat in a big room for 2 full days and gathered these 9 key reports that were developed by our country hubs, summarising their findings at the national level through their partners, through their networks. And this youth strategy team really brought this together and developed a set of recommendations and finding what was known as the summary report for the big conversation, which then fed directly into the creation of our new strategy, which you can see at the bottom here of the slide, titled Unleashing the Power of Youth to Change Our World. And the findings from our youth strategy team looked at a number of issues, and as you can see here on the picture on the right, big issues were access to education, access to services, so water, sanitation, increased employment opportunities, responsive governments, and the role and the value of young people as leaders in development. That was a key part. And what we saw across the board was that young people are ready to take a leadership role in development and decision-making processes. There is increased recognition towards this and the value of youth participation, but there's still a long way to go, and there's still a lot of inequality in young people's ability to access opportunities, platforms, and services. That was a major feedback we had, and as the youth strategy team, we created the summary report, which, as I said, was adopted by our senior management team in the organisation, and we continually held consultations with throughout the creation of the strategy with the CEO, the board of trustees. We did presentations, and we've been really fortunate enough to have this new global strategy now, which is directly led by the young people we serve, and throughout our leaders within the organisation were held to account by a youth strategy team to make sure that it is the voices of the young people we work with and for coming through enough and strong enough, and that was a key part. And we've seen this. On Monday night we were awarded the A award for transparency at the Bond Conference Awards, and because of the work we've been doing with Accountable Now and other similar organisations, this has been recognised as a really great model for including youth-led accountability, internal structures and mechanisms within an organisation. So I'll stop there.
Cool, thank you. So hi, welcome everyone. thank you so much for this space. I'm just looking forward to this conversation. So yeah, my name is Elisa Novoa, and I work at CIVICUS as the Youth Engagement Officer. And I'm going to talk a little bit how the process of mainstreaming youth has been going in the past years, what approaches we are using, and where are we going on youth engagement in the coming years. So for those who haven't heard about CIVICUS, World Alliance for Citizen Participation, it's a global members-based alliance. We have over 3,500 members in 175 countries. And our goal is to strengthen civil society and citizen action around the world. So we support and engage with civil society, youth and non-youth, mainly in the global south. So youth engagement has been always part of our core values and mandate, and we've been trying to engage with youth in a very transversal way at the same time as we engage with non-youth actors. So the main approaches we've been using is mainly through consultations. So, for example, the annual membership surveys that are addressed to youth, collaboration when we create the State of Civil Society report, or the Environmental Enabling Environment Index to invite youth to participate. It could be a partnership as a youth activist being interviewed, or as an author giving some contributions to the publication, or giving them also space in leadership structures. So in this case, the board of directors. We don't have, in this case, for example, a policy that says that we have to have a young member in the board. However, we've always driven youth participation to be nominated, or someone to nominate a young member in that space. And that for now, this term, we have 2 members under 30. Last term, we had also 2, before that 1, so it changes. But there's more or less always a young member there. However, this person doesn't speak on behalf of youth constituents. It's just a leader, a young leader, who represents himself or herself. And the way we encourage this mainly, or the enabling factor that we use, is to be sure that everyone has access to information, and also then also the opportunity to enable and to engage is through convenings. CIVICUS organizes a lot of meetings with its members to strengthen those relationships, to build that knowledge that we all are seeking about how is the civic space in certain countries, and enable those discussions. So I don't know if you heard about it, but every year CIVICUS organizes the World Assembly. Now it's called the International Civil Society Week. And that space where all members and non-members convene, well, it started in 1994, but thanks to the force and power of youth delegates, it has evolved, and we now have a dedicated space for youth in this event called the Youth Assembly. It started in 2007, and since there, it's been always a huge part of the agenda, with having over 100 young activists, very dynamic and very engaged citizens. This year will be in Fiji at the end of the year, so you're more than welcome to come. And it's a space really to exchange and to connect all the young voices, and to have a real space for discussions on youth issues, which will be then presented to the World Assembly and have the youth voices heard in that space. The importance of this space is also because in 2012, again, the youth delegates said, okay, it's very important, very good to have a youth assembly every year, but what happens the rest of the year? So an advisory group was created. So it started in 2013 with the mandate to provide a strategic and informed advice to Civicus on how youth participation issues can be better mainstreamed within Civicus programs, and also to see how they can create a more permanent body for youth within the Alliance and influence youth Civicus work and also Civicus members' work. So it was a group of 10 young individuals, members, gender balanced, more or less geographically representative. It worked very well, and they were a great support in the planning for the Youth Assembly in 2013 and 2016, and they support the fundraising for this assembly as well, and three of them were in the board. One is still in the board this term. So they created at the end of 2015 the structure, the governance structure they wanted to see for youth in the Alliance, giving them also a little bit of an action-oriented scope. So it's called now the Youth Action Team. It's also the same mandate to give advice to Civicus on how to better mainstream youth. Well, this year or this term, there are only 8 from different regions. We have Africa, Europe, Asia, Latin America. It's very multicultural and very diverse. They come from very different backgrounds as well, and they're very, very, very active members of the Alliance. So last year they met in Johannesburg to draft the strategic priorities and where they want to see this youth engagement work. So the main priorities for the coming years will be to advocate for a wider space for youth in young human rights defenders and to wide civic space for young activists. Also to have more access to meaningful participation for all youth and civil society events or programs setting the agenda and decision-making processes. So to really support that effort. Also working a lot on networking and movement building, not only with youth from CSOs, but also networks of young entrepreneurs or networks of national councils. Yeah, a more diverse network to support and exchange our common goal to respect and defend our human rights. And also another most important strategic priority is to mobilize more resources to support youth engagement and raise awareness on how, on which are these opportunities and channels for youth to engage in civil society. So this youth action team, they are like the steering committee of Civicus Youth Working Group. And the Youth Working Group is the community of young members. So now we have around 860 young individuals under 30. So we define youth people under 30. And also in this group we include the youth organizations, so organizations who work on youth issues. And it's a space really to exchange, to build capacity, to share opportunities, and to develop and test new ways of engagement. So we open the space for young at the UN level to have access to speaking slot or to have a space to organize a study event, to take part of campaigns like the Global Citizen Day of Action, to be part of international celebrations like the Youth Day, and now we are starting a mentorship program. So it's a very dynamic, very diverse, and it's also all about testing and learning ways of engagement, how it works, because it always depends on the context. But it has been a very, very good experience. Yeah, we've seen a lot of challenge, but also many opportunities. And this youth action team right now, that we are in the phase of strategic priorities consultation for CIVICUS in the coming 5 years. We've seen that the space has been increasing, giving like specific feedback from youth to this process. There are links between the YAT and the board, mainly the board youth members and the YAT, so they can talk and see what are the priorities, etc., etc. And now, those are like more or less the advantages of having a youth working group, to have a specific space where we can brainstorm all these important advices and systematically put it into the agenda of the organization. Of course, there are some challenges, mainly getting youth into governance structures. It depends a lot on orientation. We don't have an orientation session or training to teach youth specific skills, or I don't know, yeah, skills on how to be part of the board. For now, the youth members who are in the board are already great leaders in their organizations or movements, but we will be very interested in exploring a space where non-youth leaders can develop those capacities to then be part of governance structures. Yeah.